Welcome back to Making Simple Games with Python. We're on lesson 2 of the Hangman game. I guess this is still beginner level, but for people who perhaps got a little bit more confidence and experience with Python. Before we start, let's recap on what we've done. If you haven't seen video 1 in this series, it might be worth watching that before you watch this one. So in the real world, I had to think of and remember my hidden word. In the computer program, I'm going to do that by creating a string called hidden word. And it doesn't matter how many letters are in the word, it will draw the appropriate number of blanks. We need to enable the user to input guesses, and we need to have some mechanism for storing those guesses. And it's probably a good idea at this stage to notify the user if they've made a duplicate guess. We can make guesses. The computer will tell us if we've made a duplicate guess, and correct guesses will be filled in to the blanks until the word is complete. As expected, when we make duplicate guesses, we lose a life. When we get a guess that's not in the word, we lose a life. And eventually, and quite quickly, we run out of lives and it's game over. When we successfully guess all the letters in the word, we get a message saying well done and it's game over. Having been successful in getting the basic game working, what we're now going to do is make some modifications that will make the game a little bit more user-friendly. For a start off, we're going to look at setting up a list of words that the game can choose from, so we don't have to reset the hidden word every single time. Because we want to select randomly from our list, we need to import the random module into our program. Then we'll create a list which we'll call hidden words. So our hidden word will be randomly selected from our list of hidden words. We don't need to add much extra code for this, just modify an existing line. The syntax for doing this is pretty straightforward. For testing purposes, I'm going to add a print line which will output the hidden word so we can see it's going to be different every single time. And because I don't want to run the rest of the program, I'm just going to stick an input command in which will just halt the program and wait for me to do something before it continues. Here I run the program a few times just to see that you get a different output. The nature of randomness is that sometimes you will get the same word come out more than once. Using print statements to output variables at different stages in the program is a useful thing to do while testing. Once you've tested the program and you think it's working, then you can delete those statements. The next thing we're going to do is draw the hangman. Now, in order to do this, we're going to go right to the top of our program and we're going to add something new that we haven't used before. We're going to do something called define some procedures. In Python, these might be called functions, but it's important to understand that procedures and functions are different things, and I'll probably explain this in a later video. For now, think of a procedure like a subroutine, a small program within the main program that we can call upon when we need it. Here's some old school computer graphics, and as you can see, I'm just using print statements to create the appearance of a scaffold. We'll create a number of these procedures so we have the different stages of our hangman. If I run the program and then interrupt it, I can call that function just by typing in its name. There you can see it runs. And now, using the wonders of video editing, I'll quickly create my other procedures. There's going to be 6 in total for each stage of the hangman, including the final stage where the man is fully hanged. I will test that these display correctly by running the program, interrupting it, and then typing in the name of each of the procedures that I've made. And as you can see, all the stages of the hangman display as required. What I now need to do is add some additional code into the main game loop. And what this is going to do is it's going to look at the number of lives that the player's got left. And then, depending on what that number is, it's going to draw or call the function related to the correct stage of the hangman. We'll create a selection statement that uses if, elif, and else to compare the number of lives. And then, depending on what those number of lives are, we draw the different stages of hangman. We'll check for 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1 lives, and if it's none of those, we have an else statement that says, well, if it's not any of those lives, it must be 0, so we'll draw the final stage of the hangman. Let's test this by running the program and playing through the game. Every time the player makes a guess, the number of lives is looked at and it draws the appropriate scaffold. I've deliberately made some mistakes here so we lose the game. As you can see, each stage of the scaffold is gone through until we get down to 0 lives and the final stage is drawn. You can modify the number of lives that the player has and the number of stages of the scaffold. All you need to do is just add some more procedures and then make some changes to that selection statement. What we'll now do is create a real simple menu using some of the techniques that we've already used so the user can choose whether they want to replay the game or quit. This means that the player does not have to restart the program every single time that they want to play the game. As before, I'll define a procedure. I'll call this one menu. We'll use print statements to create a little welcome message, and then we will give the user some options to choose from and then ask them to input the number of their choice. Whenever we call the menu procedure, it will also call the hangman 6 procedure, which will draw the full hangman. We're using the variable choice to store the user's input. Now I'll create a simple selection statement which will call a function called hangman, which we haven't defined yet, if the user enters option 1, or we'll call a quick procedure which we haven't defined yet if they enter option 2. If they enter anything else, it will give the user a message that they've made an invalid choice and it will recall the menu subroutine. I've actually made a small error while making that selection statement. I'll give you a clue. It's got something to do with strings and integers. I wonder if you can spot it. So we're now going to make the whole of our hangman program from last week into a procedure, and we'll do this simply by defining the name of the procedure, which we'll call hangman, and then all of the code that's underneath that we're going to indent it one tab. That makes that code part of that procedure. After the game over line, we'll call the menu again so the user can choose whether to restart or quit. To access the sys.exit command, we need to import the sys module into our program. And then we add the line sys.exit open close bracket if the user makes choice 2. Because all of our code is now contained within procedures, I need to call a procedure before the program will run. And there we are. Let's test it to see if it works. So entering option 1 should have run the game, but instead it's taken me back to the menu, and at this point I realised I'd made some kind of mistake. I wonder if you spotted it. Of course you did. The problem was that when I asked the user for input, I'd asked for a string input. But when I did my comparisons, I compared to integers of 1 and 2 rather than strings of 1 and 2. Once I corrected this, the problem was solved. As you can now see, selecting option 1 allows me to play the game as normal and already demonstrated, and option 2 exits the program. If I try and input anything that's not 1 or 2, it will give me an error message and take me back to the menu. This concludes the tutorial. You could consider creating some additional procedures to blank the screen in between turns, and the top tip would be to create a bunch of line breaks. You can add difficulty levels, having 3 lists, easy words, medium words and hard words, and add user input to choose which list to choose. You could then add an additional menu option which would allow a user to select the difficulty setting. There are lots of different ways of doing the hangman game, and this isn't the only one. You could try different techniques to improve your skills. If you enjoyed this tutorial and found it useful, please drop me a like and a sub. I'm always interested in comments if you think I can make my videos better. Thanks for watching.